On this episode of Costume as Character, I spoke with sex education costume designer Daniela Pearman about her work on season 4. But before we get into that, if you want more Costume as Character videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. When we begin season 4, all the characters have gone through a lot of change, but one in particular was Otis. And in terms of the way that he's dressed, we saw a resurgence of a lot of these staple items that Otis wears, particularly the jacket. He wears a lot of brown. It's very much his look. When I started season 4, my instinct was that came from a place of he's ended his relationship with Ruby. He's sort of reverting back to the person he was, the person that he knows himself to be. When I spoke to Daniela, that actually wasn't the inspiration for her to return to these key pieces.
Well, we went through each of them about what we were going to keep the same, what we were going to change. So I think with Otis, I think from the get-go, it was always like he hasn't had time over that summer or whatever it's been between the series to necessarily change his look. You know, he's got a newborn sister, his mum, you know, helping his mum look after Joy. And so there's been no time for him really to kind of, you know, he's kind of mourning Maeve leaving and all this stuff. So it's kind of like, yeah, we see him as he's been, because there hasn't been a massive time jump. And, you know, even as we go across the series, you know, he's probably the one that doesn't have as much of a chance to kind of change in a way. Do you know what I mean? Because he is still kind of navigating where he's going and what he wants.
Maeve is one of my favorite characters, whatever that says about me. And in particular, her style is very cool. And when she's in the UK, it has a sort of broken down grunge aesthetic. It's a little immature in terms of fit and fabric. When she goes to America, you see a leveling up of her wardrobe, and it doesn't change totally in style, but all of a sudden she has access to different thrift stores, different designers, and that changes ever so subtly the way that she's dressing. And that speaks to the fact that Maeve is really stepping into this next phase of her life, and she's really found herself.
No, I totally know. And I'm so glad that it did come across like that and you saw it like that, because I think at the time, obviously, we shot all the stuff with Dan Levy in one. So that was done quite early on when we weren't sure what was going to happen in 8. So we kind of had a little bit of an idea, but not as much as you would if it was shot nearer the time in the blocks that we sort of shot it in. And I think the whole thing with Maeve, when me and Emma were sort of discussing it at the beginning, was, you know, she has had this transition to America. It's not been a long time. She also doesn't have any money. You know, she's there on a scholarship. But we did want to show that transition to this new environment. And I think obviously going to a university, even though she was sort of mixing with older students, because the whole thing is that it's like a scheme sort of at an actual university, right. Whereas over in Cavendish it's college, so it's before university. So we wanted to kind of give her a bit more of a mature look, but still in keeping with what we know of Maeve. So instead of, you know, the sort of Doc Martin type boots, she's kind of had like the battered cowboy boots, and we kind of updated her leather jacket to a new vintage one, but that felt a bit more mature. So it's like she's kind of taken influences from new university friends and like gone to thrift shops and picked up these new pieces, but it's still kind of all in the same style of Maeve.
Another character who really steps into himself in this season is Eric. At the new school in Cavendish, he meets a new band of friends who are all very queer and very proud and very out, and they dress in a way that reflects that inner personality. Eric straddles these worlds of his home life, his church life, and his sort of teenagehood, queer, young adult life. And there's a really beautiful scene where those two worlds collide. And I won't get into it. I'll let Daniela tell you exactly how she picked which outfit she would put Eric in for that moment.
So the first kind of like 3, I think it's 3 episodes, I think he's pretty much in a version of what he's worn before, maybe with some new bits sort of thrown into the mix. And then we made sort of a conscious decision that after the queer party, after they've had that dress up and he's gone to the queer party and he's seen this amazing world that he wants to be and can be part of, I think it kind of then opens up more confidence in when he goes to college to sort of dress how he's feeling, kind of thing. So even with, you know, you can kind of see the influences that Coven had, and that's kind of originally that green sweater. To be honest, I'd put that in my initial mood board, the exact same sweater. But when I just got episode 1 and I didn't know much about it, so pre to getting the job, when I'm kind of giving ideas and stuff, I'd actually put that down because I could see that there was going to be some transition in Eric's sort of situation and his costume. So that, I don't know, it just felt quite brilliantly queer to me in a way, that because it's kind of showing flesh but not in a, you know, in kind of an interesting, not obvious way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think when we kind of then used that, it was brilliant because it was kind of like he was going out to meet the Coven, wasn't he? And then suddenly get a phone call from his mum.
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those things that was kind of in between. It wasn't like his queer party look, but it also wasn't his conservative sort of sweatshirt, the sweater we put him in when he went to church at one point. So it's kind of like, it's kind of an in between kind of, and that's kind of what we wanted to do, because we didn't want it to look totally out of place.
Right.
And that everyone would go, oh, what are you wearing? But we did want him to feel kind of exposed.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Because it's not what he normally would wear to those situations with his mum at a church event.
While Daniela only did the costumes for season 4, she obviously paid very close attention to the character development from seasons 1 through 3. And what we know about Eric is that he takes a lot of pride in how he dresses, and he's very influenced in a good way by the worlds that he's in. So when he goes to Nigeria, you see him wearing these outfits that he takes a lot of pride in that reflect his heritage. And when he goes to a wedding, you see him also dressing up in a way that reflects how proud he is to be at that place. And so it makes sense that in season 4, as he joins this group of people who express themselves through clothes as well, he's able to push that boundary even farther in terms of really reckoning with how he sees himself as not just a high school student anymore, but as a queer adult. There's no better sort of illustration of how important clothes are to people than through Aimee. In season 3, she reveals a sexual assault experience, and in season 4, we delve into that a little bit further, and she talks about how she still owns the pair of trousers of jeans that she was wearing on the day that that assault happened, and she can't bring herself to get rid of them. Now, I think we all have something like that. We have a sentimental item that is maybe painful, but also is hard to get rid of because it tethers us to ourselves in a way. With Aimee, it's tethering her to a trauma that she's struggling to move on from. What's so amazing about this season is there's a really beautiful moment where she puts on those jeans, she wears them out, and then she takes them off and she burns them. There's no better illustration of how important costuming is for character development, because it reflects how true those things are for us in the real world.
Well, I think with Aimee, I think when we first started talking about how Aimee was going to progress costume-wise, I think she was really keen to sort of wear more trousers, but also kind of, we really toyed with kind of that Bridget Bardot look at the beginning. She really kind of liked that sort of feel to her. And then as she kind of like starts her art classes and stuff, we did make her go quite arty with that sort of red jumpsuit and stuff that we had like loads of good fun with. So I think the whole thing with Aimee's costume throughout the whole thing, it is kind of a bit sporadic and it does change quite a lot, but I think that was kind of intentional as well, because it's her trying to find out who she is and what she's comfortable in as a woman, and as a woman with those things that happened to her, she's dictating her life now, not what happened to her. So yeah, she's kind of experimented with loads of different looks. And if I look back at it actually now, there are quite a few different looks leading up to that moment when she takes those jeans and she wears them, and she goes out and she takes, just, does this all still happen? And she sort of takes them off and burns them.
Yeah.
So like I can own this now. I can wear these, but then I'm going to get rid of you, because that is me saying a final bye to this.
Season 4 had another big change, which was that we left Moradale behind and we went to Cavendish. And Cavendish as a school is way more progressive, not futuristic so much, but definitely contemporary. And sex education has always taken place in this kind of a liminal space between the 70s and present day, or the US and the UK. And we actually touched on this a little bit in our Heartstopper video, which you can check out if you want. And Sex Education Season 4 plays with that in a very new way. Daniela was very interested in maintaining some of those aesthetics, but not letting them overwhelm the new location that they were at. Cavendish had to feel like a real place, and it had to, in its costume design, represent the fact that it was super progressive and then a little more open than Moradale had been.
Obviously, yeah, the past 3 series, it has been kind of that kind of 80s John Hughes, but with sort of influences from every decade. And that's kind of what I wanted to still do with this new series, because I didn't want it to be too jarring to the audience that suddenly it's a different show. But we did want to show that it is kind of moved on from the past series, because it is a new environment and it is a new kind of situation for them all. So I think with Cavendish as a whole, I think, yeah, worked really closely with the production designer and obviously the producer and the directors to build this new world, but that still had similarities to the look of the show that we know and love. So obviously with Cavendish being kind of more sustainable and green and a bit more kind of forward moving, we kind of, you know, still used all those vintage looks and thrift shop looks and kind of influences from every decade. So, you know, if you find an 80s piece in a vintage shop and a 70s piece in the vintage shop, and kind of mismatch them all together to create these individual looks, and also kind of use small brands and small companies that kind of, you know, produce sort of sustainable clothing. So Abby's coat that we see, like the patchwork coat she wears at the beginning, you know, that's a costume friend of mine that has her own company called Wild Folk Studio, and she makes all these amazing coats out of recycled blankets and stuff. And so I wanted to kind of show that, you know, that thing where you can make your own clothes, you can adapt clothes from your wardrobe. You don't have to buy new, but then you can mix them with new things as well. And also what we tried to do with all the essays and stuff is like we had kind of like a truck of clothes, but we wouldn't always put the same person in the same clothes. We'd kind of mix them around, so people were wearing the same pieces of clothing but in different ways. So it's like that kind of like clothes swap thing and everything like that. So it was still keeping all that influence of all these eras that the show has always done, but kind of just in a modern new way of how people do that now. And how you see people on the street wearing a mixture of stuff, and you can get your individual style from doing that, because you're not all wearing the same thing that you bought from the high street.
Season 4, obviously these characters have grown a lot since we saw them in season 1, and with the exception of Otis, really, their styles have all evolved a lot, particularly in the jump between season 3 and season 4. As a result of that, Daniela went through with the actors and figured out which items those characters would hold on to over that summer period. And I think that's really interesting because, I mean, I don't know if you did this, but I remember being a teenager and the whole back to school, you know, shopping thing and picking out new clothes or things that you wanted to keep and using those in a way to set yourself up for the year ahead. It was very much a sort of manifestation of all of the things that you wanted to happen in that year. Selectively picking out the certain things that you're holding on to, like Aimee and the jeans, that is really indicative of the way in which costuming not only tells the story of a character's emotions in a moment, but really sets their trajectory for the rest of the season. If you liked that video, we have recently also spoken with the costume designer on Heartstopper on the morning show. So if you're into costume, definitely check those out. Thank you so much for watching.